Chapter 3, Tungulin. An ember in the coals of the quieted campfire popped, waking Gabriel from his sleep. The morning was peaceful. Songbirds were singing somewhere above the translucent blanket of mist that rose from the woodland gully where he had made camp. Nearby, a crystal-clear spring bubbled up from the rocks, and it trickled, sparkling, over large, smooth, black creek stones, running down into a noisy brook in the shady hollow to the east. Along with thick flowering ferns and downy green moss, it was as beautiful a forest garden as could be imagined. Great regal trees seemed to hold up the leafy roof like giant ornate columns of gray and brown, their immense limbs stretching toward the climbing suns like chilled arms and fingers seeking warmth. The sky through the trees was a deep rich blue, promising a good day of travel ahead. Gabriel pulled his blanket aside and stood, stretching. His neck was sore and his back ached from carrying the boy and their two packs for so many miles. How he wished he could have retrieved his skycraft Horizon near De Rouge, but it had just not been safe enough to head in that direction. Gabriel knew that they were being tracked and hunted. Twice he had spied two figures in the distance, scouring the trail behind them for clues, and both times he was able to elude them again before being spotted. He had intentionally misled them in the direction of De Rouge, hoping to gain some valuable time and distance. He stood in a shaft of golden sun's light that had broken through the trees, allowing it to warm his chilled skin. It had been 13 long days of foot travel, and he was weary, but now their destination was close at hand. He was more anxious than ever to finish this burdensome chore and get back to his previous business as Swaria Talu. He washed up in the cold brook, then made a meager breakfast of leftover rabbit, brown berries, and stale corn muffins from his canvas shoulder pack. Excuse me. After he had finished eating a lean portion himself, he went to the foot of an old gnarled pine tree and gently kicked at something curled up in the flowers between the knotty roots. There was a stirring, then the boy sat up and rubbed his eyes. Excuse me again. "Come on," Gabriel said to him, helping him to his wobbly feet. The boy looked up at Gabriel and scowled. "We need to get going." Gabriel escorted him to the large flat stone that would serve adequately enough as a breakfast table that morning and helped him sit. "Try and eat something, chatterbox." The boy crossed his arms at the chest and turned away, his nose arrogantly in the air. "You'll eat, I've no doubt about that," Gabriel told him. "Now, let's have a look at that wound." He knelt and checked the rough bandage behind the boy's left knee. The healing herbs that we found have taken a lot of the swelling out, but the bleeding's finally stopped. It looks better today than it did yesterday. Should be fine in another few days." The boy retracted his leg haughtily and then winced in pain. Gabriel shook his head. "I always made a point of avoiding children in the city. Now I remember why," he said. He walked through the ferns back toward the trail they had been following the day before, a few hundred feet to the north of their camp. "I'm going to go have a look around. Try and behave yourself, chatterbox." The boy ignored him. Only a week ago, the boy's chances for survival had looked grim. Miraculously, the possibility of a complete recovery now seemed imminent. The Backrad and anti-venom had saved his leg and possibly his life, but to Gabriel's chagrin, not a word or gesture of thanks had been given. Ever since the boy had regained consciousness, he had not smiled once, nor attempted to mutter a single word. Gabriel still did not even know the boy's name. "Lucky it wasn't a deadlier poison," Gabriel called over his shoulder as he weaved through the trees high on the opposite bank of the hollow. "Or I might have been amputating this morning, instead of having another one of these pleasant conversations with your highness." The boy watched Gabriel disappear into the brush on the far side of the dale. Then he hungrily seized the food in his hands and shoved it, handful by handful, into his mouth. He was so famished, now that his appetite had returned, that he swallowed everything without hardly chewing, not leaving a single morsel. He even went so far as to lick his fingertips and dab for the tiniest crumbs on the surface of the rock. Still, it wasn't enough for him. With all this food rationing, he felt like Gabriel was starving him, and it made him more cross than ever. He looked around for any other scraps, and then he poked through Gabriel's pack for more. All he wanted was some decent food. He found a small bag of dried fruits and nuts and ate them all without pause. Then dug for more. But the pack was then empty. The boy scowled. At least Gabriel had finally left him alone, allowing him some time to think. He limped back to the spring and filled his belly with clear, refreshing spring water, then wiped his mouth on his silk shirt sleeve. After the ripples stilled, he looked at his reflection in the pool. He was filthy. His mop of goldenrod hair was shaggy and unkempt. He looked at his dirty, torn clothes, his dirty fingernails and muddy shoes, and frowned contemptuously. It was degrading and utterly unthinkable, a person of his stature wallowing in such lowliness, and lapping water like a dog. Abhorrent. As soon as he was physically able, he planned to give Gabriel the slip. No telling where they were heading, and there were still pressing matters to attend to. He splashed the cold stream water on his face and neck and washed his hands as best he could, wiping them dry on his shirt tail. He practiced putting weight on his bad leg, walking up and down the small bank of the stream as best he could. He stretched and squatted and kicked and twisted, yearning to regain full use of it as soon as possible. It was healing well, but still the area immediately surrounding the wound was red, numb and sore. There would surely be a horrible scar there. "I love this little forest," Gabriel suddenly said, popping out from the trees a few yards behind him. The boy jumped at the sound of his voice. "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to jolt you," he said, and then he continued playfully. "You know, it's said by an old wizard that used to live near here that strange little people live in this forest. They're called Galathians. This forest was named after them. Supposedly, there are thousands of them living here in their homes built under the roots of the trees. Now, I've been through these woods many times, but I've never seen a trace of them. It's said that these little elves work all night tending these forest gardens, keeping them clean and beautiful, but I just don't know. You didn't see or hear anything while you were sleeping, did you?" The boy rolled his eyes. "Me neither." Gabriel looked at the breakfast table. "Look, you missed a crumb." The boy looked, but again, Gabriel was just aggravating him. The rock was as bare as a bone. The boy frowned, feigning indifference. Gabriel smiled at him. The only pleasure he could muster on this dreary trip was to aggravate the boy whenever possible. "Glad to see you have your appetite back, although that's the last of our food, except what we can rustle up along the way. I checked the path ahead, and it looks clear enough. If there are no objections, I'd like to be on the way." "No? Good." Gabriel packed up their belongings. He put out the coals with a few bowls of water, then spent nearly an hour hiding all traces of their having camped there, as he did every morning. It was a meticulous job of digging and burying, raking leaves and sticks by hand, then arranging pieces of debris piece by piece so that every scent and clue was either covered or disguised. As usual, the boy did not help. Instead, he chose to watch a sparkling silver butterfly flutter about the woods and descend into a small flowering bush. He was surprised to see it snatch up a rain beetle to feed to its carnivorous family, waiting hungrily in the branches nearby. "Off we go, then," Gabriel said as he shouldered the 2 packs. He pulled the boy onto his back with a grunt, slipping his legs into a rough harness he had devised. Already his back ached, and there were many miles to go before they would rest again. Hours passed on the trail. Gabriel kept a brisk, steady pace, always wary of the possibility of anyone following them. They crossed paths with other curious travelers on occasion, always with a friendly nod or gesture. The trail wound down a steep hillside and over a ravine on an old bridge carved from a hollow tundra tree. By the skilled and detailed handiwork of the carvings, Gabriel knew that Mehekians had been the bridge builders, although few Mehekians lived in or around Galath anymore. The Mehekians were a solemn, hermit-like people, proud, intelligent, and fierce if need be, very different from humans. Gabriel had known many and liked them in general. As he crossed the Mehekian footbridge, echoes of his footsteps reverberated through the dense wooded valley below. Optimism, but mostly boredom, prompted Gabriel to attempt another conversation with the restless boy on his back. He tried speaking in several of the most common languages, but As before, and he had expected it, it was to no avail. After a while, he gave up and began singing a whimsical Persian travel song, something that reminded him of his own land so far away. Forest, O forest, trees, O green, alter not thy ancient ways, fill us with thy scent and lore, Persia of the kingdom of day. Home is where our heads doth lay, our feet shall lead us far away. Hey, hey, on the morrow, forest of the kingdom of day. Paths lead us to bubbling brooks, we feast on fruit and honey, yo. Fire at night to soothe our souls when the day's journey is done, E-O. Home is where our heads doth lay, our feet shall lead us far away. Hey ho, on the morrow, forest of the kingdom of day. Dear, mind the cottage ere I return, O lady fair of hair silk golden. No danger shall I fear tonight, for her love lay in my heart hidden. Home is where my heart resides, paths shall lead back to familiar doors some morrow, forest of the kingdom of day. Now when he finished the last word, Gabriel picked up the pace but fell silent for a long time. For a few hundred yards, a trail ran along the edge of a rocky cliff. Another tudor tree bridge crossed a rushing stream that fell over the edge of the cliff far below to a deep, crystal-clear pool. Gabriel took the opportunity to rest there on the rocks, plucking a few handfuls of fat blackberries that grew on the rocky ridge. Whippoorwills soared nearby among the cliffs. To the southeast, the hills rolled off into the distance. The nearest ones were spring green, every leaf visible and clear. The furthest hills were pale gray and misty. Gabriel dove off the cliff and had a refreshing swim in the icy pool, while the boy tried to fill his empty stomach with berries. Gabriel called for him to join him in the water, but the always modest boy ignored the offer. Gabriel thought it was just as well. Soon as the suns passed the halfway mark in the sky and began their slow western descent, Gabriel sealed the higher rocks and basked in the warm sunlight on top of a smooth boulder until he was dry. Then he picked up his load, and with a grunt and a sigh, he continued on his way. Varieties of woodland flowers covered the hillsides, yellow, violet, red, and white. Bees busily dashed from blossom to blossom, gathering golden nectar for their nearby hives in the howling caves. Even the tiny birds called pipers seemed exceptionally playful as the two marched by. Soon the single path they had been following for days joined a wider one, a column of stone marking the intersection. There were fresh cart tracks and many footprints on this wider road, men's boots, horses, llamas, dogs, cattle, and an occasional wild animal's foot. Gabriel could tell the boy was interested in this new development because he struggled from left to right to try to read the words on the marker. "Can you please be still?" Gabriel said sternly. "I can't hold you if you keep wiggling." The boy ignored him, craning his neck to read the marker. The print, however, was worn so badly that it was illegible. "By the gods, boy," Gabriel snapped. "It's a road marker. We're almost to Tungulin. About 10 more miles as the crow flies." "Hey!" At the word Tungulin, the boy had kicked himself free from his perch and he fell to the ground with a painful grunt. He quickly struggled to his feet and did a little dance, limping when his weight was on his left leg. Gabriel was aghast to see that the lad was actually smiling. "Did I just hear you say something?" Gabriel said. "Tungulin," the boy exclaimed, arms out to the sky. He grasped his hands together, prayer-like. "I made it!" Gabriel shook his head. "Not yet, but almost," he said. "Finally, some dialogue. I take it that you approve?" Yes, 100 times yes," he answered. "Tungulin was my destination all along." "Well, you could have asked me if you were that concerned about where we were going. I would have told you." "I didn't know who you were for quite a long time, and even when I learned, I wasn't sure if I could trust you," the boy replied, exhibiting his usual arrogant disdain. "You were serving my purposes well enough for the time being, doctoring my wounds, feeding me, although not very well, eluding possible dangers with your fancy woodsman tricks, so I persevered while I regained my strength." Gabriel looked at him frowning. You speak Ish pretty good, he said, but I've never heard your accent. You're not from Galgaraya, are you? Yes, well, I'm very pleased with this most recent development, the boy interrupted. Perhaps all is not lost after all. You said 10 more miles. 8 to 10. Let's be on our way then, sir. There's not a moment to waste. I'm sure you're anxious to reach Tungulin as I am. Hold on there, Chatterbox. You're a bit commanding for someone your size, aren't you? How about answering a few simple questions for me first? I think I deserve it. The boy stamped his good foot. I assure you, there's no time for nonsense. I don't care if you fall to the ground and throw a water girl's tantrum. I'm tired and sore, and we're not leaving this spot until you explain a few things first, he demanded. How did you end up way out there in an assassin skycraft? Why are assassins after you, and what is your name? The boy's hands went to his hips, and he scowled. They stared at each other for a moment before the boy finally spoke. I knew I shouldn't have said anything, he muttered. He looked at Gabriel. I can't tell you, he said. You can't tell me? Then we could just sit here until you starve to death. That should take until nightfall with your appetite. You don't understand, the boy said. I didn't say I won't tell you. I said I can't tell you. More truthfully, I shouldn't tell you. Not yet. I can't tell you anything. Not until I'm safely within Tungulinian walls. Only there will it be safe enough to speak. The muscles in Gabriel's neck were knotted tight. I didn't like you much when you didn't talk, and I like you less now. I should put you over my knee and take a willow branch to your backside for all you put me through. You're the most ungrateful little tyrant I've ever met. Don't let it bother you. You'll understand well enough when we reach Tungulin. Now, please, can we get on with this? I've been traveling for so long. There's no excuse for such rude behavior, Gabriel started to say, but then he stopped. It was no use. There was no need to encourage this battle of wills. There was plenty of time for all questions to be answered. He pointed to the south where the brown trail bent and twisted like a snake over the rolling wooded hills. We'll be there by nightfall if we're not intercepted, he said, otherwise by tomorrow morning. The boy stared intently toward the south. He relaxed, leaning back on a tree stump, sighing as he unbuttoned his embroidered blouse at the shoulder. He looked nearly radiant. Almost there, he said to himself. I thought this day would never come. Next part. Gabriel had ranged lands far and wide and had seen many strange peoples and strange customs, but, like the boy's clothes and manner, his sharp, eloquent accent was completely unrecognizable. Perhaps he had come from far away. I'll get you to Tungulin, he said. I'm familiar with the castle city, and I know quite a few people there. My father's good friends with King Van, too. It's been a while since I've been there, but we should receive a warm welcome. The boy stood. Excellent. Let's depart then. Immediately, sir, he ordered. I am in haste. The sooner I reach... Suddenly, Gabriel sprang to his feet, gazing down the trail behind them. They found us, he said. The boy followed his gaze. With desperate effort, Gabriel seized the boy under the arms and pulled him off the trail with him, squatting behind a dense orangeberry thicket. He took his blaster from its holster and charged it. Before the boy could mutter an objection, Gabriel slapped a palm over his mouth. The boy started to struggle but froze when two skycrafts whizzed down the trail at full speed right past the spot where they had just been standing. The sleek one-man crafts made little more noise than passing birds. A bit of dust stirred, then settled. Gabriel released his grasp and stood. So that's who've been after us this whole time. Habad and Terzda, by the bones of Oziah Abbix. How dare you manhandle me as if I'm some kind of baggage, the boy spat, jerking away from him. He stomped his foot in anger. Habad and Terzda are assassins, killers, murderers. They're hunting us. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? The boy yanked his small pack free from Gabriel's shoulder and marched back toward the trail, dragging it in the dirt. Believe me, I know who they are, and I know what they want, he replied arrogantly, keeping an eye in the direction of the assassins. As soon as he stepped onto the trail, he paused only a second to make sure the coast was clear. Then he headed south, in the direction Gabriel had instructed him, toward Tungulin. My leg seems to have healed up just fine, and so the time has come for us to part ways. Thank you for all you've done. he called. "I hope to reward you fairly one day, should you call on me. If not financially, which I doubt you need, then in recognition, a plaque or something. Now, good day, sir." Gabriel watched the boy waddle away. "A plaque? Or something." "That's it," Gabriel spouted. "That's it? No explanations, nothing?" The boy continued marching, limping as he walked. "Hey!" Gabriel called out. The boy stopped in his tracks, as if he were being repeatedly inconvenienced. He turned to face the Persian prince and took a deep breath. "You're a noble and gracious man, Gabriel Dindayan," he began, patting the beads of sweat from his face and neck with what appeared to be a fine kerchief in bad need of a washing. "There is no doubt that I've traveled with the best of company. The few reports I've gathered regarding your deeds have been favorable, except for your cavorting with women of ill repute. And respect for you is widespread and growing. I was very fortunate to have you come upon me when you did. Surely luck was with me that day, but here our paths must divide. You may now go on your own way, back to your beloved temple if you desire, or to your fiancée up in Sicily or wherever else. My path is chosen for me, and I am no longer in need of your services. Thank you for your help. I tell you this in all sincerity, prosperity to you. Good day, sir." Gabriel stared at the boy's back as he hobbled purposefully away. Within a matter of seconds, he had disappeared around the turn. Next verse. Gabriel had a seat on a craggy tree stump. He supposed that he should be relieved to get rid of the impudent teen. He had been nothing but a bother, a pest, an itchy blister, a drain, a thorn in his boot, a rash, a relentless ache in the backside. But he wasn't relieved. He was confused, angry, and irritated. The obstinate little brat could not march one full day on that bad leg, especially without any water or food. And the assassins were still at large, closer than ever. It wouldn't take them long to realize that they had lost the scent and turned back around to backtrack for him. Did the boy even have a weapon? None that Gabriel had seen, and it was Wolverine season 2. Without his assistance, Gabriel knew that the boy would not make it another hour alone. The ungrateful imp needed to learn a lesson here. Gabriel was tempted to turn his back, as the boy had suggested, and be on his merry way just to serve the little devil right. But instead, against his better judgment, he shouldered his pack and started reluctantly, angrily, down the trail after him. He planned to keep just out of sight, shadowing him from the trees, only to keep an eye on him until he reached civilization safely. Then Gabriel would gather fresh supplies and return to the city of the sky to resume his explorations. Once he finds himself in a little trouble, we'll see how he welcomes the sight of me, he thought. We'll end it there, about halfway through the chapter. Then we'll end up doing Tungulin Part 2 next.